Some stories exist to enlighten the mind, some to temporarily inspire hope or passion. But there is one set of writings meant to chill you to the bone, or make you question what is actually possible. These stories are called Creepypasta. I'm Living My Life Backwards, written by Richard Saxon. Tomorrow is the day my wife dies. It won't be an expected death, nor is it one that she deserves. What will happen is simple, a random act with no meaning beyond fate's command. We'll be out walking, holding hands as we're headed home from a long day at work. Once we get to a crosswalk, her phone will ring. It's her mother, calling to tell us that her cancer's returned once more. It doesn't come as a shock. She's been in remission for a couple of years, but her body has been ravaged by the previous round of chemo and radiation. The words wear heavy on my Lucy. I see the tears well up in her eyes. She tries to stay strong in front of me, pretending she can handle the moment she's been preparing. Then she starts to approach the crosswalk. What she doesn't notice is, during our brief pause, the lights turned red. As she takes her first step onto the crosswalk, she gets hit by a car, smashes her head to the ground. She dies on impact, and the paramedics can do nothing to help. In less than a second, everything she ever was will be taken away from me, and I have to watch it happen. I'm so sorry, Lucy. Her death is a fact that I've known since we first met as young children, yet I can do nothing to prevent her untimely demise, no matter how badly I want to. She made me promise, swear, never tell her the inevitable truths of the future. Even had I tried to do so, it wouldn't have mattered. We weren't meant to know the end. That's what makes life beautiful, she said. But they're just words written down in a book, a reassuring lie that I don't remember. That'll be it. The last memory I have of my wife alive. Once her body has been buried and once I've moved away to another city, I'll forget she ever existed. All I'll be left with is a hole in my heart that I won't be able to fill until the day that I die. Because that's my curse. To remember everything from my own future, but nothing of the past. To the best of my knowledge, I've always been this way. From the very first step I took as a toddler, and from the first word spoken, I was given every single memory of my entire life, even though I hadn't yet experienced them. In return, they vanished from my mind once I experienced them. In the most bizarre way, I'm living my life backwards. I'm burdened with the knowledge of tomorrow, knowing fully well that I can do nothing to alter the oncoming passage of time. Thus, at the ripe age of 35, I've forgotten every single factual detail about my life. And once these words have been put down on paper, they'll be gone too, washed away by a fractured mind. But before we continue my story, let me answer a few questions such as, how can I write if I forget ever learning it? How can I walk? How can I even have relationships with other people if their details elude me day by day? To the first two, I'll answer this. Do you remember your first steps? The act of learning how to stand on 2 feet, or is it simply something you know how to do? A skill ingrained into your very being? Do you even need to think before speaking, or do words just flow out with only the context processed? Love, on the other hand, is an emotion that transcends memory. It's so deeply buried in our hearts that there has been cases of total amnesia, ridding the person of everything, save the love that they hold within. Memory and skill don't necessarily go together. Some abilities are ingrained in our muscles and our subconscious mind. That's why I still miss my mother, even though I remember nothing about her. And it's why I still love my wife, her last night of life. My curse is more like reverse amnesia, and the stories I have to tell are simply words read from a notebook. Each day I awake to read events from a time I can't remember. The handwriting doesn't even belong to myself, but to 2 distinct people. The first set of stories, spanning from my childhood to my mid-20s, were written by my mother. She was a brilliant person, quick to action and smart as hell. She noticed something was off at a very young age once I started predicting things that hadn't come to pass. The first incident occurred when I was 5 years old. It was such an innocuous, dumb complaint. I didn't want to go outside because of the storm. I was afraid the lightning would hit us during the picnic we'd planned. My mother was naturally confused as the trip had been scheduled for the next day, and the weather report had confidently stated the day would be filled with nothing but sunshine. Then, as the next morning arrived, my mother was shocked to see that my predictions had come true. Baffled but still skeptic, she wrote it down in her own diary as little more than an oddity. Just a year later, my mother found me crying in my room. I was distraught because our cat had died. She sat down and started to comfort me. Sure, our pet was of advancing age, but he still remained healthy and curious as ever. In the middle of my frantic cries, the cat just walked in, checking what the commotion was about. A month later, he passed peacefully in his sleep. A good old cat who lived a great life. As I grew older, I quickly learned to separate past from future. My mother had already put two and two together, and she knew my life would be a complicated one, full of challenges. Because of that fact, I had difficulty making friends. Back then, my wife, Lucy, lived next door, and even she figured out something was weird about me. To her young mind, it seemed more like a superpower than a curse, and she eagerly promised to help me keep my secret. Whether my ability was a gift or a curse, my mother never loved me any less. Instead, she took it upon herself to write down whatever moments we shared. That way, my life, though not remembered, would never be forgotten. She did her best to make my life manageable, but despite her best efforts, it was a painful journey. Not just for myself, but for those who loved me. Of course, she never blamed me. After all, it wasn't my fault. But as people eventually do, my mother passed away. It's something that I can't correctly recall, but the emotion connected to the event lingers firmly in my heart. It was my 22nd birthday, and we had booked a table at a decently fancy restaurant. Whether the food was good or bad, I can't remember. All I know is, on that day in particular, it was raining. On the slippery roads my mother was supposed to drive. As she turned a foggy corner, she was hit by a drunk driver who couldn't react in time to stop. She died then, on my birthday, and I couldn't accept it. So I did something horrible and changed it. That's the day I learned the true curse of my condition. I did everything I could to convince my mother not to go. I begged her to stay home, threatened that I wouldn't show up for my own birthday if she as much set foot outside the house. Thanks to my tantrum, my mother agreed to stay at home. She was smart enough to know that something terrible was about to happen, and she didn't press the matter any further. We spent the evening watching a movie. Mindless fun for someone unable to remember the plot, but I was ecstatic nonetheless. I thought I had changed the course of history. My mother never left the house, and as a result, she was never hit by that drunk driver. But that's the funny thing about fate. There's nothing that can stop it. In the end, my efforts were fruitless because she was supposed to die. That night, her soul, spirit, essence, whatever the hell you want to call it, vanished. Her time had come, and though I had hindered the death of her physical body, she was taken away from me. It wasn't until the next morning before I noticed something was wrong. I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, unresponsive and catatonic. None of the doctors could explain it, as her vitals appeared fine. Despite being physically healthy, she was just gone. I learned that day that I can't save anyone who falls victim to the cruel judgment of destiny. In the end, whenever I tried, it only made things worse. The worst part is that, since I never actually experienced her death as it was supposed to happen, it's the only memory of my past I still remember. Though it doesn't match up with reality, in my mind she was hit by a drunk driver, but according to every available document, she spent her final years in a coma, only dying once her body finally gave out. By the time of my mother's death, my girlfriend had known about my curse for years. and took it upon herself to take over the task of recording my life. Each event, important or minor, was jotted down into the same notebook that my mother had carried around for so many years. To this day, I don't know what I've done to deserve such an amazing woman. Despite my complicated life, she still loved me. It was odd, though, having known each other since children. As she got to know me, I started to forget her. I guess it helped having grown up side by side with my secret. That's the only reason she could possibly understand, to see beyond it, to see who I truly am. Even then, as we first met, I knew we'd end up married one day. Of course I did. I had every single memory stored in my mind. Maybe that fact allowed me to act more confident than I truly was, or maybe destiny played a hand in our pairing, I don't know. But by the time we entered an age where crushes became an acceptable fact, we quickly started dating. Together we shared all of our firsts. Though I don't remember any of them, I can recall the feelings connected to each event. I love her with all my heart, despite losing some of the memories I have of her for each passing day. Which brings us to the present day. Tonight we won't be able to sleep. She won't know why, but something will irk her mind. Instead, we'll stay up late, talking and reminiscing about times long since past. I won't crack. I won't cry. I won't let her know what's about to happen. She'll just write down her final entry in my book, and then we'll fall asleep in each other's arms. I can't prevent her death, lest I want her to suffer the same fate as my mother, and once she's gone, there will be none left to continue my story. Each day will pass as it always has, and I'll forget it, doomed to wander the world alone. I can do nothing save wait for my eventual death. That's why I'm writing this now as my wife sleeps beside me. I need the world to know what I can't. I need someone to remember my story, to remember that I once walked this path. I don't regret my life because, despite all odds, it was a happy one. It's been filled with love, and despite my memory being lost, I know that there will be a trace of my presence, rippling through time itself. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the story. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and bell notification so you don't miss any future content. If you'd like to read this and other amazing stories from Richard Saxon, there's a link in the description. Also, I'd like to invite you to my Twitter where you can stay updated on any future content. Plus, I post a lot of crazy stuff you might find interesting, so that link's also in the description. And I guess that's it, so we'll see you next time.